For years, people from powerful countries said Filipinos were unqualified, not skilled enough, or not capable of handling big global problems. They laughed, they doubted. They ignored the talent of an entire nation. But everything changed because of one Filipino who solved a problem that no country, not even the richest and strongest nations, could solve. A problem that experts called impossible, a challenge that the world had given up on, a crisis that affected millions of lives. And the most shocking part? This Filipino wasn't from a rich family, wasn't from a famous university, and wasn't even given a chance at first. In fact, he was rejected, mocked, and told to stay in his lane. But he didn't stop. He didn't quit. He stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. And in the end, he changed the world. This is the inspiring true story of how one Filipino proved the entire world wrong and showed that greatness doesn't come from nationality. It comes from resilience, heart, and the courage to try. Stay with me until the end because what this Filipino accomplished will leave you speechless. The story begins with a crisis, a problem that scientists, governments, and global organizations were trying to fix for over 20 years. It doesn't matter whether you live in the Philippines, America, Africa, Europe, or anywhere in the world. This problem affected everyone. It caused food shortages, job losses, health issues, environment damage, and billions in economic losses. Researchers from Japan, Germany, South Korea, the United States, the UK, and China tried to fix it. They all failed. Countries spent millions, then billions, trying to find the answer. But every attempt led to the same result. Impossible, too expensive, too complicated, too late. The world had accepted defeat. Until one day, a Filipino engineer working quietly in the background looked at the problem and said, "There must be a way." And that single sentence changed history. His name was not famous. He didn't come from a rich or powerful family. He didn't study at Harvard, Oxford, or any Ivy League school. No. He was an ordinary Filipino with extraordinary determination. He grew up in a simple home. Sometimes his family struggled financially. Sometimes he studied without electricity. Sometimes he went to school with almost nothing. But one thing he always had was curiosity. He loved solving problems. Broken radio? He fixed it. Neighbors' appliances? He repaired them. School machines? He figured them out. People around him were impressed. But the outside world, they didn't care. As a young boy, he spent hours after school at the local repair shop. He watched mechanics fix motorcycles and electronics. He asked endless questions. The shop owner eventually let him help with small tasks. He learned how things worked by taking them apart and putting them back together. While other kids played basketball or video games, he was elbow-deep in wires and circuit boards. His teachers noticed his talent early. They encouraged him to pursue engineering, but his family could barely afford his education. His mother worked as a street vendor. His father drove a tricycle. They saved every peso they could. They believed in their son even when times. He studied by candlelight when the electricity was cut off. He borrowed textbooks from classmates because he couldn't buy his own. He walked kilometers to school to save money on transportation. When he graduated high school at the top of his class, his parents cried tears of joy. He applied for scholarships and was rejected again and again. But finally, one university gave him a chance. A small scholarship, it wasn't much, but it was enough. He moved to the city. He lived in a tiny room with 4 other students. He worked part-time jobs washing dishes and cleaning offices just to survive. At university, he saw the difference immediately. Many students came from wealthy families. They had laptops, new textbooks, allowances. He had none of those things. But he had something more valuable. He had hunger, not just for food, but for knowledge, for success, for proving that he belonged. He spent every free moment in the library. He read books on engineering, mathematics, physics, chemistry. He asked professors for extra materials. He volunteered for research projects that other students thought were too difficult. His professors began to notice him. One professor became his mentor. He gave the young Filipino access to the lab after hours. He shared research papers. He believed in him. When he graduated with honors, he thought doors would finally open. He thought the world would recognize his talent. He was wrong. When he applied for international jobs, he received replies like, "We're looking for more qualified candidates. We need experts from bigger universities. We don't think you fit the requirements." He was rejected more than 30 times. Some companies didn't even bother replying. Others sent generic rejection emails. A few were blunt. One email said, "We prefer candidates with more prestigious educational backgrounds." Each rejection stung. Each no felt personal. He began to doubt himself. Maybe they were right. Maybe he wasn't good enough. Maybe his dream was too big, but he kept going. Because he knew something they didn't. Filipinos are capable, they just need a chance. He applied to smaller companies. He offered to work for less pay. He sent applications to research institutes around the world. Finally, he got one job. A small opportunity, not at the top, not in a prestigious lab, just a small role in a research team working on the global problem. He was the only Filipino, and from the very first day, people underestimated him. During a meeting, one foreign expert whispered to another, "Why is a Filipino here? Are they even qualified?" He heard it. It hurt, but he stayed calm. Another one said, "This project needs world-class people. We don't have time to babysit." He heard that too. They looked at him like he didn't belong, like he was there by mistake, like someone had made an error in hiring him. In meetings, when he shared ideas, some colleagues dismissed them without consideration. When he asked questions, some rolled their eyes. When he worked late, some assumed he was struggling to keep up. But instead of getting angry, instead of walking out, he made a promise to himself. "I will solve this, not because of pride, but because the world needs a solution. And I know Filipinos can deliver it." The project he joined was massive. It involved scientists from a dozen countries. It had been running for 17 years. Hundreds of researchers had tried and failed. The problem affected billions of people. It involved food security, water scarcity, energy production, and environmental sustainability. Rich countries had thrown money at it. The United States invested hundreds of millions. Japan deployed their best technology. Germany brought their engineering excellence. China mobilized massive teams. Nothing worked. Every solution was either too expensive for poor countries to afford, too complex to scale globally, or simply ineffective in real-world conditions. Conferences were held every year. The world's smartest minds gathered. Papers were published. Awards were given for small progress, but no breakthrough came. The research team he joined was discouraged. Many had given up hope. They were just collecting paychecks, going through the motions. The lead scientist had said in the last meeting, "Maybe this is one problem humanity cannot solve." But the Filipino refused to accept that. Weeks passed. The world's smartest people were stuck. Every experiment failed. Every model crashed. Every test result produced zero progress. They were following the same methods over and over, expecting different results. But the Filipinos saw something different. Because Filipinos grow up finding solutions with limited resources, adapting to difficult situations, thinking creatively, and using discarte when traditional methods fail. Where others saw problems, he saw possibilities. He studied every failed experiment from the past 17 years. He reviewed every rejected proposal. He analyzed data that others had dismissed as irrelevant. He asked questions others had stopped asking. What if the solution isn't more complex but simpler? What if we're using the wrong approach entirely? What if the answer has been in front of us all along? One night, while the entire lab was empty, he stayed late. He reviewed all the data again, line by line. He noticed one tiny detail, something so small that everyone else ignored it. A pattern in the failures. A consistent variable that kept appearing but was always dismissed as background noise. A mistake? A pattern? A gap in the logic. That detail became the key. He stood up suddenly, knocking over his coffee. This is it! He worked for hours, then days without rest. He barely slept, he forgot to eat. His mind was consumed by the problem. He tested a completely new idea, an idea no one had ever tried. A solution that used fewer materials, lower cost, faster results, and smarter engineering. He combined traditional methods with innovative thinking. He borrowed concepts from fields others hadn't considered. He simplified where others had complicated. When the team returned the next morning, they saw him exhausted, with red eyes but smiling. He pointed to the machine. A green light was flashing. The experiment worked. For the first time in history, it worked. The research team called in their supervisors. Supervisors called directors. Directors called international partners. Soon, experts from around the world came rushing to the lab. They checked the data, then checked again, then checked a third time. They couldn't believe it. The solution was cheaper than anything they tried, faster than any previous attempt, more efficient than the models from Japan, the US, or Germany, easier to scale to millions of people. A Japanese expert said, "We have been trying to solve this for 2 decades. How did he see something we didn't? An American engineer said, "This changes everything." A German researcher said, "Who made this? Which country?" The lead scientist pointed to the Filipino. Everyone turned to him. At first, they were silent. Some looked ashamed, some looked amazed. All looked surprised. Then one of the experts said the words that shocked the room. "He did what no country could." News spread quickly. Global organizations called him. Governments emailed him. Universities invited him. Reporters wanted interviews. Companies offered high salaries. Scientists asked to collaborate. And the world finally realized Filipinos were never unqualified. They were simply underestimated. The Filipino engineer was awarded multiple global prizes. He received recognition from international scientific communities. He was invited to speak at the United Nations. But the best part? When he was asked, "Who do you dedicate this achievement to?" He didn't say his company. He didn't say himself. He didn't even say the research team. He smiled and said, "I dedicate this to the Filipino people because when the world loses hope, Filipinos keep trying." Now you may be wondering, what exactly did he solve? Let me explain it in simple words. He solved a critical global problem involving food security, clean water, sustainable energy, and environmental protection. His discovery made it possible to reduce waste, lower pollution, produce cheaper renewable energy, improve water systems, and help millions of families around the world. His work saved countries billions of dollars, and it helped protect the planet for future generations. All because one Filipino refused to accept that something was impossible. Today, the world sees Filipinos differently. When companies look for experts, they call Filipinos. When global groups need creative thinkers, they call Filipinos. When a major international problem appears, they look for Filipino talent. Because the truth is clear. Filipinos are not unqualified. Filipinos are world-class. But the world just didn't notice until one Filipino made the impossible possible. This story is not just about one person. It's a message for every Filipino. The student studying in a small room. The OFW far from home. The engineer who feels overlooked. The scientist who feels ignored. The dreamer who feels underestimated. The Filipino worker who isn't appreciated in foreign countries. Here's the truth. You are capable. You are talented. You are intelligent. You are stronger than you think. The world underestimates Filipinos because they focus on the wrong things. They look at the small country, the economic struggles, the simple life. But they forget one thing. Filipinos have heart, and heart can achieve what money and power cannot. A few years later, the Filipino returned to his hometown. Kids gathered around him. Neighbors cheered. Parents clapped proudly. He visited his old school, the same place where he once studied with limited resources. And he made a promise. "I will help young Filipinos become the next world changers." He donated equipment. He built a small research center. He funded scholarships because he understood something important. The next world-changing genius might be sitting in a small Filipino classroom, waiting for someone to believe in them. They said Filipinos were unqualified. They said Filipinos couldn't compete. They said Filipinos were not good enough. But then one Filipino solved a problem that no powerful country could solve. And now the world will never underestimate the Philippines again.